You're watching The Conversation. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden announced last week that he would be visiting Africa in October, his first as U.S. president and certainly his last, as he will not be defending a seat in the November elections. Angola, one of the African countries he will be visiting, is getting a big stage to market itself as a thriving democracy in the face of an onslaught by activists over its human rights record. Last week, Amnesty International called on the Angolan authorities to release 4 activists who have been unjustly detained for a year and whose health has drastically deteriorated in prison. And Human Rights Watch had said President João Lourenço had signed into law 2 bills that fail to meet international human rights standards and will severely restrict freedom of the media, expression, and association. Now, analysts tell us the bastion of democracy in the world has turned a blind eye to this and is instead focusing on what could be gained from the African country. To discuss this, I am joined by Gonzalo Ribeiro Teles, communications consultant and founder and political analyst in Lisbon, Portugal. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, so first, in terms of economic benefits, how strategic is the Lobito Corridor to the U.S. and the global community?
Well, first of all, I think for the U.S., strategically, it's interesting because Angola is the second largest oil producer in Africa. Joe Biden wanted to have a step in that for some time now. And I also think it's interesting in a U.S. perspective in order to woo China out of Africa or to have to not gain such a strong footprint as China has in Africa, namely in Angola. This is a complete game changer, this railway, which covers 3 countries, Zambia and Congo also, but beginning it in Lobito is huge for Angola and even for the US. Now, I think what's interesting about this is also connecting the dots with what Angola might want from this and what João Lourenço might want from this instead of taking something like this to China. And it also has to do with the previous elections and what was said by the Angolan people.
Okay, so let's understand now what is in it for Angola. This launch of the corridor by the Biden administration was in 2023. So what are the benefits for Angola?
No, economically, I mean, it's huge because it's a 1.3 trillion billion investment by the US. So economically, it's huge. And then it can have a climate impact also because it's, I mean, all these goods that were transported between countries before were through road. And now being it in a railway, it's completely energy free and completely different in that stage. And it also enhances Angola to more markets and is a complete game changer. As I said, even economically, it can be a job. It already is becoming a job booster. And the employment, as we know, mostly with the youth is very high in Angola. So this can be a main change in that.
Okay, and we also understand that this visit by the U.S. president would further strengthen bilateral relations with the West. But then a few days ago, Gonzalo, Amnesty International called on the Angolan authorities to release 4 activists who have been unjustly detained for a year and whose health has drastically deteriorated in prison. Now, we're looking at a deplorable or an abysmal human rights record. Do you think that in any way could affect the relationship with the West that seems to be the bastion of democracy and the rule of law? Or should I just say, value for human rights?
Oh, yes. I mean, these problems, to be honest, aren't new in Angola. They happened a lot through the dos Santos presidency, and there were some initiatives to change that from Europe, not so much from the US. But again, I think that with making the US such a huge partner, this is a way of João Lourenço to kind of show that he's probably trying to democratize, the country more, and even look out for a more human rights side in the future. When you have China as a partner, China doesn't care what you do inside the country. When you have the U.S. And I'm counting on a Democratic win in November, because if there's a Republican win with Donald Trump, that can change everything, even in this project in Angola and the outcome. But I mean, when you have Biden clearly stating that this project wants to also enhance democracy in Angola, wants to raise employment in the country, wants to enhance climate energy in the country, climate change. So there's kind of a cooperation side that you wouldn't see in China. And I think that's what João Lourenço was also, in my perspective, smartly looking at inwards to in terms of these NGOs and all that is, look, we have this partner, the U.S., that doesn't stand for what China stands for, that has different outcomes in what they want with this partnership with us. So I'm looking at this for the future of the country, and for that call for a bigger Westernization, if you can put it that way, which is also a reality in the youth in the country again. And I think America has also an interesting position here, because I mean, Europe, countries like Portugal and France have always the weight of colonization in Africa. And it's an understandable weight, because it was a terrible time and it wasn't that long ago. America doesn't have that weight. So America not having the weight of a colonization like Europe can actually play this role in democracy standards and in climate standards and everything.
Well, China does not also have that colonial weight. Neither does Russia. So
yeah, but look.
So where does that come into play in this? Because we're looking at the morality or the viability of the West having an influence along democratic and economic lines, but then some people feel that it is turning a blind eye when it comes to civility and the rights for humans, most especially those who have rights to declare or to express themselves in an African country.
Yeah, I mean, you stated China and Russia. Obviously, they weren't colonizers either. But I mean, we can criticize, and we should criticize, lots of America's double standards in the world, and lots of its hypocrisy in various parts of the world. But the truth is that in terms of cooperation, it has a human side to it that definitely China and Russia don't have. That's undoubtable. I mean, you can't deny that for the past decades in any rationale. And when you look at it, you also notice that Russia is also losing weight, not only in Angola but in Africa, because they're all, what the Wagner Group, which is mostly Russia's arm in Africa is through the Wagner Group, which is I wouldn't put it a terrorist group, but they supply arms and they live out of supplying militias and wars in the continent.
Gonzalo, I would think that. Sorry to cut in. Are you saying that the arms and ammunition that we see infiltrating into or coming into the African space is actually being powered or financed by China and Russia? Is that the connotation?
The arms by China? No, not at all. By Russia, yes. By Russia, without a doubt.
And you don't feel the West is also caught in the mix?
I think the West has played. I think the West has a position towards Africa, Europe, which is completely different in the cooperation sense. I mean, not even comparable. There's lots of hypocrisy even if in Africa, but there's a much more side of doing business with the cooperation side. With China, it's only about doing business. With America, it's also doing business with the cooperation side of lifting up the country if it wants to. And what you saw in Angola in the last elections, and I think that's the interesting part about this, and that João Lourenço, who can be lots of things, but he's not stupid, is that there's a call for a more democratic country. You see this in the youth in Angola. You speak to the youth in Angola from 20s to 30s to 40s, and there's a call for democracy, for a Western type of democracy. And I think that this partnership with America, without a doubt, is also in the long run looking out for that call, and that's intelligent in my sense.
So what is the difference, Gonzalo? What's the difference between what U.S. is trying to achieve with Angola and the way it actually, reacted to Cameroon when the country actually denied access of Cameroon to AGOA? We're talking about trade benefits. We're talking about products being transferred to the U.S. because Cameroon did not honor or give recourse to the LGBTQ community, or in other words, there's a rainbow community and the same-sex marriage that Cameroon is not willing to accept from the West, which seems to be one of the criteria from the West when it comes to the relationship with other countries. So if we have a U.S. do this to Cameroon, why wouldn't it do that to Angola?
To be honest with you, I'm not completely aware in depth of that situation with Cameroon. But is it actually a subject with Angola? That's my question. I mean, there's certain values that the West wants to uphold when it does business. Some I agree with to a certain extent. Some I think that even in America nowadays are taken too strictly in a certain sense. But when you do business and when you inject such an amount. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry. When you inject such a large amount of money in a country and you invest so much in a country, I think that it's natural and it's even important that you, I wouldn't say want to modify anything in the country. I think that's a very thin line and a very dangerous line. And there I would have to be completely...
But that's what it is. But that's what it is. That's what it is, trying to modify probably the way of life or the constitution.
Again, as I said, I don't know. I don't know the Cameroon. I don't know the Cameroon subject so well. So I don't want to go in depth in that. But with Angola, I know that that's not a subject. That's not even a topic. I mean.
Okay, so you talked about Zambia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, alongside Angola benefiting from this. I'd like to find out, is there anything of late that you're impressed about in terms of what U.S. has done to quell the violence or the unrest that we've seen play out in the DR Congo? Because if you're talking about support, economic ties, economic benefits that should spread abroad, you would have expected that U.S. in a way would have done all it can to stem or stop the violence or the killings that have gone on in the DRC for a couple of years now?
No, I think it should always have had a stronger stance in Congo. But I mean, that's as I say, we either want do we want the Americans to be a police of the world? That's my question to you. In every geography of the world.
But you see them, standing up for Israel. They're standing up for Ukraine. So why can't they do that for DRC?
I mean, you know geopolitics as I do, and Israel, I don't agree with at all, and most of Europe doesn't agree at all with how the U.S. is completely tied to Israel and to a government. I believe that this American administration just wants out of Israel and everything. But I mean, there's a historic alliance there that is very hard to break. And unfortunately, there's some hypocrisy in geopolitics with these historic alliances. that count. And when you see the amount of Jews that live in the U.S. and how much this weighs in, it's natural that they want to have a diplomatic stance in this. And probably inside the corridors or inside the private talks between administrations, they don't want Israel to be doing what Israel is doing. But the reality is that you have a madman in Israel at the moment, and you can't stop him. But I mean, that's America. Of course, that's America's problem also. But we can't blame America for everything that Israel does, because Israel's doing it on his own.
But then, Gonzalo, we have an African country in Angola, one of the top crude oil producers, contributor to OPEC. We have DRC, one of the biggest mineral resource. About 60% of that goes into powering the global community. We have Zambia, we have other African countries. So when we have, geopolitical skews and alignments going on, why is it that we won't have, the same US as a power and other world leaders stand for Africa to help it quell the situations or the unrest that it's faced with, knowing fully well that it contributes more to the growth and to the strength of the global community? Why?
Well, sorry, I didn't understand I understand your rationale, but I didn't understand why doesn't it intervene more in terms of these situations?
Yes, I'm talking about a continent that contributes more to the global community in terms of mineral resources and energy. I'm talking about oil now and natural resources, Angola, DR Congo. But then we don't have these world powers stand in line to defend or to help Africa deal with its situations, just as we have seen it done for Israel that has a concentration of Jews in the country. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, yes, I understand what you're saying, but I don't agree. Okay. I think that there's a lot. Angola at the moment isn't at war with any country. I know there's internal problems and internal militias, but the truth is that Angola isn't at war with any country. And I'm probably certain that after this partnership, and even with the money that's injected and what will be the outcome of this partnership, if Angola was at war with any country tomorrow, the U.S. would advise and would probably have a role in that, as it does with Israel. I mean, the world lives off alliances, better or worse. That's the truth. So if Angola was at war with any country, that would be a reality. And also, we have to also see that there's this belief in Africa for the past 10, 15 years, which I think is completely right, that which is a kind of a cliche, but it was the mojo. We just need you to do business. And there's an interesting side of this, which is, again, there's a thin line between how much you can intervene in a country which is completely independent, and investing in a country, and you have to separate the two.
Well, I understand. Gonzalo Ribeiro Teles, communications consultant and founder, political analyst, Lisbon, Portugal. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate that.
Thank you.